Glenn lives in the city of Fejite, which is located in the southern region of the Alzano Empire. This world is very similar to Earth, except that a lot of the humans here are blessed with the ability to harness and use magic. The town was born and developed alongside the Alzano Imperial Magic Academy, one of the most prestigious institutions attended by only the best magicians all over the country. Glenn is a young, conventionally attractive boy with thick black hair and good physique, and that's pretty much where his praise ends. He used to be an assassin before, but moved on from that life after several tragic incidents. Celica, an immortal mage and a tenured professor at the academy, adopted him after his family was killed in an accident. She introduced him to magic and taught him everything she knew, while also enrolling him into the academy, where he graduated at the age of 15. He lived under the same roof as Celica, and was persuaded by her to take up a job as a substitute professor. After much resistance and begging her to let him continue living on her money, he finally agrees. She used her influence to recommend him and convince the head of the school to give him the position. This was met with a lot of protests by other professors who saw him as unqualified and not good enough to teach their talented students. These objections held true initially. On his very first day, he was extremely late for class and ran through the crowded streets. As he rushed through, he was met by two girls who thought he was charging at them, so they used their magic to throw him into a fountain nearby. Rudia and Sistine are best friends who study together at the academy. They are kind-hearted and use their skills to help those around them, even though the use of magic is prohibited outside the campus grounds. Sistine's interest in magic was fueled by her grandfather, who had died a few years before. He had always wanted to explore the Sky Castle, which was not well known by most people. She promised she would take up this dream of his by mastering all the magical skills necessary in finding the castle. Her hair flows behind her like silver threads, and her olive green eyes make anyone's heart stop. In class, she maintains a studious, strict, no-nonsense attitude and absolutely adored her previous teacher, who helped her excel in air and defense magic. Ruvia leads a secret life and is adopted by Sistine's family after her family was attacked by evil mages. She is the daughter of the late queen of the Alzano Empire and was known as the Cursed Princess, and is rumored to have died 3 years ago. In reality, she was banished for being supernatural and possessing magical powers. Her short blonde hair and petite figure resemble her shy and laid-back personality. The two friends met each morning and walked to school together. Their encounter with Glenn left them stunned. They apologize for hitting him with magic, but instead of gracefully accepting the apology, he shows off and puts all the blame on them, completely ignoring his own faults. He looks at Rumia and goes closer to inspect her since she seems familiar, but she sees him as a creepy threat and throws him back into the fountain before running away. His lateness and irresponsibility fuel the other professor's annoyance with him being hired as he continues complaining to the head, but he is quickly cut off after being threatened by Celica. The class waits anxiously for their new teacher to arrive. Sistine, along with a few others, begins getting annoyed and plans to raise complaints about this issue on behalf of the class. After a long wait, he finally stumbles into class, murmuring useless excuses. He sees the two friends and gives them a sly look as they come to the realization that just a while ago, they had insulted their teacher in the middle of the street. He lazily introduces himself to the class and then proceeds to declare the lecture as self-study so that he can take a nap. Sisti is fed up and slams her book on the table, calling his behavior absolutely ridiculous and unacceptable. He makes an attempt to teach them but talks unclearly, writes shabbily on the board, and when a student tries to clear a doubt, he dismisses her and tells the class to find the answer themselves since he does not know either. Once again, frustrated with his disinterested attitude, she stands up to argue with him. But he hears the bell ring and runs out of the classroom even before the students, leaving her mid-sentence in shock. They sit down for lunch hoping they no longer have to deal with him, but to their dismay, he grabs a tray full of food and takes a seat at their table. She tries to start lecturing him again about his indifference towards teaching, but he quickly shuts her up by stuffing food into her mouth. The classes continue after the break, and Glenn keeps up his lazy, uninspired attitude. By the end of the 5th period, she has had enough and marches angrily to the front of the class to confront him. Even after threatening to get him fired does not work, she takes a deep breath before removing her glove and throwing it at his face to challenge him to a magic duel in the traditional manner. Ruida calls her back and begs her to back off, but she turns a deaf ear. After some more quarreling, he accepts the challenge, and they move the class to the campus ground, where he lays down some basic rules. They are only allowed to use the Shock Bolt spell, one of the most basic spells that students learn in their introduction classes. This is to prevent either of them from causing fatal damage. They will duel for 5 rounds, after which the winner will be decided. Standing 10 feet apart, facing each other, they prepare for the first round, and on the count of 3, the first shots are fired. Sistine has spent a lot of time practicing magic and has learned to chant spells quickly and fluently, a skill that Glenn absolutely lacks. Before he could even react, her shock bolt hits him, and he is fried like a chicken at KFC. Everyone stares in disbelief, seeing a student destroy the teacher so ruthlessly. The next 4 rounds are mere replays of his humiliation by her. When it ends, she demands that he start teaching them properly from tomorrow without wasting their time, but he refuses to comply since they did not agree on any specific terms before the bet. He then runs back home before she is able to question him further. Glenn's unmotivated way of teaching continues after the duel as he assigns most of the topics as self-study and doesn't bother to give out assignments or tests. When a student comes to him for help with a spell she is learning, Fejite pulls her away and offers to help her out with her questions instead. She continues passing comments about him and starts lecturing about the sacredness of magic, its importance, its impact on the world, and its invaluable use to humans. Although he has been passively ignoring most of her lectures so far, he is triggered by her exaggerated worship of magic and yells that the only purpose of magic is to hurt others. She is infuriated by his response and, without thinking, slaps him across the face before running out of the room in tears. He is stunned by her reaction but continues giving the class his philosophical insights about how, unlike other professionals such as engineering, agriculture, medicine, and more, which work for the betterment of mankind, magic was a tool that could only be used for destruction and loss. The class ends and he takes his break on the roof, pondering over the events of the day. As he is walking, he sees Rumia in a room nearby. She appears to be working on a magic circle, so he decides to go and investigate the situation. She is horrified when he enters the room and starts packing up quickly, but he urges her to stay and complete the spell. She tries it, and it doesn't work. He advises her to add more mercury to the circle and chant the spell slower, without skipping any words. To her amazement, the circle lights up in beautiful rainbow colors, indicating that the spell worked perfectly. They walk home together, and she asks him why he pretends to hate magic when he obviously has a great knack for it. He avoids the question, and so to change the subject, she brings up Fejite and her desire to master magic. Through some miracle or maybe just the influence of an attractive girl, she convinces him to apologize to Fejite and the class for his behavior. He takes her advice the next day as he bows to offer his apologies to her, leaving her jaw dropped. Still, of course, this was just a temporary change in his personality, and almost instantly, he goes back to mocking magic and spewing hatred on the traditional ways of teaching. He asks the class to think more practically about things instead of just following the text blindly. To demonstrate, he shows them the basic shock bolt spell and all the variations one can summon by changing minor details of the spell. Such changes can prove to be a great advantage in a battle. He further explains how language is a powerful weapon and has the ability to make or break anything. In order to be as efficient as possible, they must learn to manipulate the spells and chants according to what the situation calls for by trusting their gut. Finally, he ends the class by throwing the textbook onto the ground because, well, who doesn't enjoy a bit of unnecessary dramatic flair? Over the next few days, his class has become more and more popular among students. Even experienced learners flock to the classroom to listen to his lectures. Celica meets him and tells him how proud she is of his achievements in such a short span. She then informs him that she would be going to a conference along with the rest of the faculty, leaving him in charge of the class. He promises not to misbehave or mess around with the students. Meanwhile, a group of evil men belonging to researchers of divine wisdom, a terrorist group, plot their attack on the school while the staff is away. Glenn may have turned a new leaf when it came to his teaching methods, but he was still irresponsible and unprofessional when it came to being mindful of the time. This time, as he rushed down the street in a desperate attempt to get to class, he was stalked by the 3 men draped in black clothes. They have placed a barrier around the campus, preventing anyone else from entering the premises, and before he has the chance to respond to them, they hit him with a spell and knock him out. The students wait patiently for him to arrive, but instead of their teacher, the evil men enter and ask about the whereabouts of Rumia. No one in class opens their mouth except Fejite, who yells at them and questions them about why they need her. He gets irritated and is about to attack her, when Rumia stands up and reveals herself to prevent anyone else from being harmed. They escort her out of the class and address her by her real identity, Princess Ermiana. Since she isn't supposed to be alive, they plan on using her for their gain. Fejite was being held hostage in another room of the school. He was about to attack her when Glenn entered the room. He tries to get him with another spell, but is unaware that he has activated his spectral card, the Fool, which prevents the activation of any kind of magic while in its radius. The spell fades away and he uses plain old combat skills and brute strength to fight him. Without magic, the evil man is a weakling and gets beaten up by him. He recognizes his style to be the same used by men in the military and questions who he really is, but before he has the chance to ask anything else, Glenn knocks him out cold with a super strong punch to the head. The 2 of them tied him up to the chair and wait for him to wake up while he calls up Celica to update her about the situation. The group has hijacked the teleportation ports of the school. Several students have been held hostage. and no one is able to enter or leave the campus due to the magic barrier placed around it. He must deal with the problems on his own and rescue all the students. Sistine is desperate to save her friend and walks away from him, but he stops her. She breaks down and regrets everything she had said about magic. She tells him he was right and that magic was nothing but a tool of destruction. He calms her down and reminds her of Rumia, whose aim is to use magic to help those around her. Together, they would save her from the group. The evil man wakes up and starts laughing in the most creepy but also annoying way possible. Glenn threatens to torture him but is cut short when a void opens up and skeleton monsters with dark red eyes, armed with swords and other weapons, pour into the room. These brainless freaks wipe out the evil man even though he is on their side. He steps in front of her and quickly realizes he will not be able to fight them without the use of magic. After a quick punch to one of them, they'd run away into the hallway. He instructs her to use an advanced spell, which would temporarily blind the skeleton warriors. While they are distracted, he gathers all his strength, and with one swift spell, blows them all up. He falls to the ground, exhausted, the color in his face fully drained, but the fight is far from over. Another member of the group steps in front of him. He is one of the higher rankers and surrounds himself with flaming swords. Glenn gives her a secret message and pushes her off the building. He fights back and dodges the swords for as long as he can. When they hit him, he starts chanting a spell to undo their effect. However, he lacks the strength to finish the spell, and his voice fades away. To his luck, though, she understood his message and appeared just in time to transfer enough power to save him. The swords fall out, and he quickly grabs one and impales his opponent with it. They leave and go to find Rumia, but his strength is completely used up and starts collapsing. She transfers all of her remaining powers to him to save him and passes out. He is now on his own and must use this extra chance to save the school. He finds Rumia in an attic located on one of the school's clock towers. One of the institution's ex-professor, who had gone missing a long time back, was also present. He was stuck in one place and acted as a human bomb that would be set off if anyone tried to move or kill him. She was placed at the center of the room in the middle of several magical circle barriers. To break through them and save her, he would have to make use of a very limited red liquid possessed by mages. It would also rapidly drain his power, and with the ticking clock, he did not have a lot of time to rest and recover. He began scribbling down spells onto the circle using the special red liquid. One by one, he was able to break through the barriers, but his strength was almost nil, and he had very little liquid left by the time he reached the center circle. Due to his extreme willpower and dedication, she was able to force her hand through the barrier and use her amplification skill to increase in strength and ability. He got back up and wrote down the final spell, breaking the barrier and sending shockwaves throughout the campus. They had won, and with the final threat eliminated, he took a nap right there. Celica and the rest of the staff returned to find their students safe and sound. The Academy has an interclass magic competition coming up very soon, and all the students are excitedly discussing the strategies that they plan to use. Usually, every class only puts forward their top students and allow them to play in multiple events. Glenn walks into the classroom and begins sharing his plan with the class. Contrary to his usual demeanor, he is full of energy and zest as he interacts with them. He divides the class into smaller groups based on their skill set and then proceeds to place each group in a different event that best matches their strength. Rumia is placed in mental defense, Sisti in duel, a group of terrific readers are given spell recitation, and so on and so forth. Seeing their teachers so thrilled about the competition, they too are motivated to do their best and bring in victories for the class, even though they would be competing with much higher-ranking students. What they don't know is that their lazy bum teacher is only putting in so much effort so he can win a special cash bonus that is promised to the winning class teacher. Considering he is extremely broke, he really needs the money and is determined to get it. During the break, two students of different classes get into a fight, the typical male ego on display. The teachers intervene and begin quarreling among themselves, and in a rash, impulsive decision, Glenn puts up 3 months of his salary as a wager in the competition. The other teacher agrees and the bet is sealed. He has too much to lose now, and so he pushes his students to practice and level up their skills. He trains each group in different settings, giving them tips and tricks along with constructive feedback, and they pleasantly surprise him by leveling up much faster than expected. The competition will be attended by the queen, Rumia's mother. She expresses her sadness for having to pretend her daughter is dead and sending her away for her own safety. She recollects her sobbing face as she was dragged away from the only home she knew. Sistine checks in on her to see how she is doing. Even though she was holding her mother's pendant just a few moments before, she hides it and says she's fine. To her, Sisti's parents are her only true parents and nothing else matters. They hug and then head to dinner with the family, excitedly sharing details about their day. The day of the competition finally arrives and all eyes are on Glenn's class. They are kind of like the underdogs of this competition, and most people are expecting to see them be defeated. The first event is air racing. His student uses his techniques to dash through the competitors and finish first. The other events follow in a similar fashion, with his students securing the top ranks, bringing their overall rank to third place. Rumia is up next in the mental defense event. The host is a terrible person who we will call trash, although even that is too good for him. He uses various spells and tries to break through their mental barriers by passing extremely lewd comments about the players. They begin to break down and collapse, leaving only her and a Class 5 player. The very last round, which is a tiebreaker, begins. She is already struggling to stand up, and when the spell is cast, she falls to her knees. He rushes in to pull her out of the competition, but she refuses. Everyone thinks she is lost, but on inspection, they see that he has fallen unconscious while standing up. This makes her the event winner and brings their class to the second rank. The queen sits in the stands with Celica and tells her she is happy she was able to see her daughter happy and surrounded by such wonderful people. The students continued the festivities the next day by enjoying picnics all over campus. Sadly, Glenn had not managed to pack anything for himself and was roaming around hungry and helpless. When a student comes to him with a query about one of the transmutation spells, he teaches her by demonstrating it. He chants the words, changes his appearance into that of Rumia, and then encourages her to try it out by looking up more pictures, so the image of who she wants to change into is crystal clear in her head. She thanks him and leaves. Sissy runs towards him, mistaking him for her friend, and offers the sandwiches she made for them. His hunger takes over, and instead of revealing his identity, he decides to take a sandwich from her, unluckily for him. Though the real Rumia arrives there, and she realizes he is trying to steal their food. He gets sent flying through the air and lands in the middle of the forest. The sweet, kind-hearted Rumia brings him the food her friend made, and he devours it in no time. As they are sitting there, the queen approaches them, unaccompanied by her guards. She tries to talk to her and calls her by her real name, but she bows and says she isn't the princess and then leaves from there. Her mother is hurt but understands and expects this from her daughter after everything she put her through. She asks him to look after her and keep her away from any kind of danger. He promises to do his best and then follows her back to the garden, where she sits on a bench looking at her pendant. He remembers seeing a similar one when he used to work at the palace. She questions her behavior with her mother and starts spiraling, unsure about how she should feel about the situation. Glenn has only lived a few years longer than her, but his experience with life is monumentally more. While remembering his own struggles on the field, he tells her that acknowledging one's true feelings is most important for mental peace, and that maybe she would benefit from confronting her mother. Their deep philosophical discussion, thankfully for us viewers, is brought to an end when the royal guards surround them and accuse Rumia of treason against the queen and a threat to the palace. Once more, to save his life, she surrenders herself without trying to defend her innocence in the matter. They take her away after knocking him out cold. The queen and Celica have also been kept under close supervision of the guards, and their every move is being monitored. They tied her to a tree and read out the details of her made-up crime before going to execute her. She closes her eyes as tears begin to collect, and she accepts her fate. Our hero Glenn shows up just in time and hits them with a flash of light that leaves them blinded and gives the two of them enough time to escape. She argues that he should have left her since he would also be convicted now, but he is convinced that such an order seemed very fishy, and there was something else at play. Even if her mother abandoned her, there is no way she would warrant her daughter's execution. He picks her up, uses magic to jump onto the bridge, and then sprints away from the guards. They hide in an alleyway and try to contact Celica, but she is unable to help out because of the guards around. She conveys the message in a secret code. Two of the queen's personal bodyguards and Glenn's former colleagues find and attack them there. Rel casts one spell after another, but he is just as skilled as her and manages to dodge them all. Her final attack is stopped by Albert, who puts his sword in between them. The three of them used to be very close friends a long time ago, and they haven't forgiven him yet for abandoning the palace job. He explains that Rumia is being falsely accused and isn't the true threat to the queen. According to the information they have received, members of the evil researchers of divine wisdom have infiltrated the royal guard and have placed a cursed necklace on the queen, which prevents her from speaking the truth. They plan on using the special abilities of the princess as a human bomb to terrorize the town and gain control. Using the transmutation spell, they change their outer appearances to trick the guards. Rel and Albert, who now look like Rumia and Glenn, lead the guards away from them. Meanwhile, they return back to the competitions in their disguise and go unnoticed by the guards. The class is sad that they will no longer have the guidance of their teacher, but they promise he has given them all the right instructions. After a bit of pep talk and motivation from Sisti, the class unanimously agreed to continue participating and winning as many medals as possible. The girl flawlessly executes her angelic transmutation and gains a perfect score for them. The dueling match is next, and once again they defeat all their opponents until it's just Sistine and the rival class participant. Using the spells and manipulations she learned during the fight with the monster skeletons, she manages to clean the floor with the other player. This final win gets them up to the first rank, making them the victors of the competition. The representatives get an audience with the queen, and as soon as they approach her, they reveal their true identity, leaving everyone stunned. Before the guards can seize them, Celica casts a magical barrier around them, isolating the queen, the main guard, and the rest of them. He yells insults at the two of them and accuses her of being a threat. He then asks the queen for permission to execute her, and since she is under the curse of the necklace, she agrees to it and continues saying a number of hurtful things to her daughter. Unaware of the cursed necklace, Rumia believes her mother hates her and wants her dead. She gives up and allows herself to face the sword. He tells her this is all a lie and pulls out his own sword to fight the guard. The guard's only aim in killing her is to disable the curse put on the queen, so he battles him to get to her. However, with his Fool's card activated, the curse deactivates and the necklace can be safely removed without hurting anyone. The barrier comes down and they have won not one but two major situations. He strides back home, joyous to have won the bet and the bonus. Rubia interrupts him and leads him to a restaurant where the class is celebrating their victory. He sees the bill and is shocked to see all of his earnings be drowned so quickly, but he is helpless in front of so many brilliant students who look up to him as a mentor. Glenn and Sistine train early in the morning along with others in the park. They practice their fighting and combat skills without the use of any magic. Once she masters these levels, he plans on introducing her to military-style attacks and defenses. She is scared to pursue such harsh techniques, but this fear only proves she is the perfect candidate as she won't misuse her skills for evil purposes. He has started waiting by the fountain each morning for the two friends to make sure they're safe and not under any threat. Big personality change from someone who used to be later than anyone else and was thrown into that same fountain for being an idiot. They meet and are about to head to school when Rel jumps over them with her mega sword out of nowhere and aims at him. He stops her and greets her with an intense head pat, calling her overactive and dumb. She has been sent by the palace to guard and protect Rumia from any danger, and she also hoped to be able to look after him. Little did she know he was no longer the depressed, irresponsible individual he used to be. He had evolved a lot over the months, and Celica also commented on how he has started thinking a lot more like a teacher. They reach class and he introduces her as a new student. When asked about her hobbies, she blabbers about her role at the palace but is quickly interrupted by him. All the boys in class are too mesmerized by her to bother about what she says. She then continues talking about her dedication to him and how he is her everything. This leaves Sistine, who very noticeably has a crush on him, in a bit of a shock. The boys realize they have been rejected by her even before they can ask her out. They ask her to join them for lunch and show her around the cafeteria, where the strawberry tarts catch her eye. She stacks a large number of them on a tray and gobbles them down. If you haven't noticed yet, Rel is a bit of a social pariah. The class gathers outside for the next class, which deals with attack magic. Their goal is to hit a dummy that is set at a distance. When it is her chance, she misses the first 5 attacks using the shock bolt, and everyone thinks she is just another attractive new. With her final chance, she summons a blade out of the ground, leaps into the air and sets it hurling towards the dummy, leaving nothing but ash behind. They grow slightly afraid of her, but Rubia ensures she doesn't feel excluded. Glenn decides to take them all on a field trip across the sea to a magic research lab. To excite them, he boasts about the tropical weather and the beaches where they can swim, not to mention the attractive girls in the class who would change into bathing suits. While the eyes of the boys light up, the girls just shake their heads in disappointment. As they head to the boat, a shady peddler stops in his way and introduces himself as part of the mage course. He warns him to be wary of Rel, as she is not as innocent as she seems, but he dismisses this and joins the rest of the class. They reach and have to carry their seasick teacher to land. After all his battles, who would think a bit of water would leave him so defeated? On the beach, they decide to play an upgraded version of volleyball by combining magic with the sport. A fun game takes place between the teams as the sun sets over the horizon. As night falls, the boys plot to sneak into the girls' room but are stopped by their teacher. They try to overpower him with magic and are quickly electrocuted by him. Rel has started getting along with the girls and they play around in the water under the starry sky. She questions Glenn about his decision to leave the mage corps and abandoning her. She feels the other girls have stolen him away from her and storms away in a rage. The next day, as the class walked through the forest to the research facility, Rel behaved distant and cold towards them. Even when she fell, she refused to take their help and threw a whole tantrum telling them to shut up. They are taken aback by her behavior and worry they did something to hurt her, but he assures them that she is just a little unstable right now due to a mood he was responsible for. If only he knew the kind of disaster that was heading their way. They research the White Alchemy Lab where they are given a tour through the premises. Since it deals mostly with life forms, they are situated on such an isolated island. The students are amazed to see all the work being done by the lab to create new types of chimeras. These genetically modified species will someday hopefully be used for the good of the world. Rumia and Sistine also discuss the Revive Life project, a secret mission that was abandoned years ago due to its unethical nature. Rel stays silent the whole trip and keeps to herself. She's begun developing a hatred for the girls because she blames them for taking away her best friend. After they return back to the hotel, they still try to reach out to her and help her out, but she yells at them and runs away. Glenn steps in and explains the situation, urging the girls to continue being patient with her. She sits alone at the beach, feeling miserable about her life when she sees her brother, who was supposed to be dead for years, walk towards her. She can't believe it really is him, but he explains that he hadn't fully died when they were on the battlefield. He was captured by the researchers of divine wisdom and has been working for them all these years. He asks her to help him kill Rumia in order to release him from his bondage. Although hesitant to hurt her at first, he emotionally manipulates her and convinces her to fight on his side. Glenn sees her talking to him and runs to pull her away. He is too late as she has already moved to his side and stabs him with her sword before heading back to the rooms. Meanwhile, Albert is dealing with another psycho witch in the forest. She summons zombies from the ground and sets the trees on fire, but he is skilled enough to swerve off the attacks. Once they see that Glenn has been incapacitated, she fades away and he rushes to help him. Rumia is alone in her room waiting for her friend to return with food. When she enters the room, she drops her bags and stares in disbelief as she sees Rel with her sword drawn and Rumia unconscious on the ground. She tries to attack her but freezes in fear and is unable to stop her from escaping. Albert enters with his body thrown over his shoulder. He is on the thin line between life and death and has to be saved immediately. She gives him CPR while he starts chanting a prayer of healing using different spells and abilities. Rumia wakes up in a new place with her hands tied above her head. The brother-sister do insincerely apologize for what they've done, but explain that she must be used for the bigger plan to be executed. They manage to heal most of his injuries, and after resting for a while, he wakes up ready to go back into battle. He tells him that Sistine had played a major role in saving him, but had passed out from exhaustion. The Mage Corps had found links between the Alchemy Lab and the banned Revive Life project, and he had come to the island to investigate it. Before handing him the gun, he punches him in the face for abandoning them, causing Rel to become unstable. He accepted his mistake, and together they set out to save the princess and their friend. During their fight, Albert had placed a tracker on the evil lady Lena. They used it to track the location of the researchers, which led them to an abandoned facility inside huge caves. The researcher who had met the class earlier turns out to be part of the evil operations taking place under researchers of divine wisdom. They have continued experiments to revive the dead and to create clones of the living, but the final element required is the amplifier power possessed by her. On his command, the magical machines are turned on and her powers begin to be sucked out. Rel watches in silence, not wanting to upset her brother. Once they enter the caves, they see no signs of any security. It is only when they walk further that they come face to face with the Chimera monster. It is a mutated lion with a loud roar, and with just a few spells they are able to destroy it. They continue walking and are next stopped by a turtle-licked giant monster. Again, it isn't much of a match for their powers and gets vanquished in no time. The lab is running out of time to finish the process, and she decides to leave them before the two fighters arrive. The final monster in their way is an ugly, burning half-man that looks like it was drawn by a toddler. Albert fights it alone while he makes his way to the lab to save Rumia and Rel. When he enters the room, he sees his student hung up by chains and Rel standing guard in front of her brother. He keeps trying to convince her that he isn't really her brother, but she does not listen and casts a magical barrier around them. Realizing he has no option but to fight her, he goes into a defensive position to protect himself from her attacks. Rumia tries to remind her of the time they spent on the beach, but she turns a deaf ear to her. He then asks her to try and remember her brother's name, and that's when she pauses and struggles to give an answer. No matter how hard she thinks, she cannot recollect his name, which triggers her memories to resurface. Years ago, before the project was banned, two siblings were at the forefront of the research along with another guy. Let's just call him Guy. The sister's DNA and astral self were being cloned using the brother's magic. Guy was one of the biggest benefactors of this project and wanted to create an army of clones for himself. When Cyan, the brother, found out about his plans, he contacted Glenn, who was still part of the Mage Corps. He spilled all the details of the project and asked that his sister and the clone be kept safe. Unfortunately, before the mages could intervene, Guy had already killed both siblings and escaped. The clone was the only person remaining to be saved, who became one of his closest friends, and that was none other than Rel. With the original magic of the brother gone and all the restrictions being placed, the project had come to a stop until now. Rumia's magic was a substitute element that they were able to harness, and Guy, who had been pretending to be her brother, almost succeeded. He shoots at all the computers, but it's too late, as 3 clones have already been formed. These were new and improved versions that did not have any emotions. He ordered them to finish off his enemies. Although strong and swift, the new clones are quickly knocked out by him, and Guy gets a well-deserved punch in the face. Rel feels a lot of guilt for her existence, but they talk her out of it and remind her that she is just as much human as any of them, and that her guilt and sadness are proof of this. They return back to the beach safely, where the students have been anxiously waiting for them. Rel has been invited to Sistine's home to live with them for a while. She apologizes for her behavior and thanks them for their hospitality. The next day in school, Sisti gets the shock of her life when she sees her childhood crush, Leo, descend from a carriage. He has been invited as a guest lecturer to the academy. He still has a crush on her and does everything he can to impress her. He takes her on a walk in the garden and asks her to marry him. She straight up refuses the offer and tells him she has a lot more to do in life. One such thing being research and exploration on the Sky Castle to fulfill her grandfather's dream. He continues pestering her, but Glenn steps in and blocks them from having any kind of relationship. Instead, he declares himself as her lover and swears to marry her if he wins a duel against him. Albert later meets him and informs him of the new developments with the Revive Life project. A special substance with potent use called Angel's Dust has been rediscovered, and they must investigate the matter further. Humans use this as a drug and end up destroying themselves. He remembers his old friend Sarah Silvers, who had died trying to destroy this substance. Her looks were very similar to Sistine's, and Albert suspects is one of the reasons he has such a fondness for her. The students are divided into 2 groups for each of the teachers. They will be participating in a mock battle that is led by them, and the winner will get Sisti's hand in marriage. The rules have been set down by a higher-level professor, and the judges are seated on the stage overlooking the field. Leo's team has a much higher advantage in terms of power and skill, including his own training as a researcher. However, if past events have proved anything, it is that Glenn will find a way to win even if the odds are stacked against him. Both teachers formulate a strategy to teach their class and show them various attack and defense spells that they can use during the battle. The teachers will be connected to them via an audio system and can guide them as they fight. The teams have taken a triangular formation, one that is widely used in modern mage warfare. They further split into groups and go after the opponents. Leo's team has picked up several strong attack spells, but the other students were taught a better strategy to defeat them. They lure them into a forest to Glenn. They blindly chase after him and end up falling into various traps set up. Rel is another secret weapon of his team and wipes out groups of students with her sword. All over the field, fire and wind explosions are seen. The few opponents left in the forest are hit with shock bolts by Sisti, and the rest run away in terror. Leo cannot accept the conclusion of this battle and decides to challenge him to another duel, one that will be fought only between the 2 of them. He wants to marry Sisti no matter what. She hears them fighting over her and gets furious by the way they treat her. At no point was her wish or opinion discussed, and again they try to push her away, but she slaps him across the face before exclaiming how much she hates him. The 3 girls leave the field and are headed home. Rubia calms her down and urges her to confront him directly about the situation instead of just being angry at him. She knows there is something more going on that he isn't disclosing. Back in the city, Mage Court have found another fatal case of angel dust. Albert calls up his friend to discuss how they can proceed in this matter. He is standing alone on a roof thinking about his past and talking loudly about Sarah and her resemblance to Sisti, unaware that she is standing near the door. He sees her and tries to cover up everything he said. He regrets treating her so poorly and explains that the real reason he intervened was not to marry her, but to protect her dreams and aspirations that would be crushed if she married Leo. Speak of the devil, and he appears on the terrace and starts revealing intimate details about her teacher's past at the palace. It triggers his fight mode, and they engage in a brawl even though the duel was not set until the next day. Surprisingly, he loses the fight and is thrown to the ground with injuries to his head and arms. Dejected by such a loss, he walks away from both of them, leaving her with him. He was working on his own and wanted to marry her so he could gain the wealth and influence that the family had over many officials of the town. He threatened to reveal her friend's true identity of being a royal if she did not accept his proposal soon. She agrees to marry him with no other choice left, and the news quickly spreads throughout the school. Her classmates try to talk her out of it and call it a stupid, rash decision, but she looks away and stays silent. They even try asking Rumia to convince her not to do it, but she simply lowers her head. He walks into the class and takes her away. Rumia contacts her teacher and updates him on the situation. He tells her he will fix it and to have faith in him, but then disappears without a trace for days. The wedding preparations continue, and she shows them her white dress. There seems to be no hope left as she walks down the aisle to Leo, and the ceremony begins. Just like the hero in movies, he slams the doors open and objects to the wedding. The students cheer him on, and he throws a smoke bomb at the altar so that he can carry her away. She protests and cries that she needs to go back or else her friend will be in trouble, but he has already worked out all the details and spent the last several days planning how to defeat him once and for all. As if things weren't bad already, angel dust addicts were now rising and taking over the city. They were mindless bodies with great combat skills. He uses a multitude of different spells and skills to clear them out and protect her. She is shocked by all the violence she witnesses and sits down in terror when Leo appears in front of them and reveals his true identity. Jadis, a former member of the Imperial Mages, used his body to deceive them. He has spent his years slowly killing off officials in higher posts in order to eliminate any competition. His final goal is to seize the Akashic records so he can control the principles that govern the world. It would make him one of the most powerful beings on the planet. The only thing standing in his way now is Glenn. The Fool's card is useless in their fight since he utilizes illusion spells instead of direct hits. A fierce battle breaks out between them, and he seems to be on the losing end of the fight until Sistine comes back and lends him her power. Together, they fight back and break through all his spells and summons to finally overpower him. He goes in for the final blow, but sees that his student is in bad condition and rushes to her side, which gives him a chance to escape. The class rushes to their aid and celebrates their victory. Many evils continue to lurk in the city, and the Akashic records are still under threat, but for now, they take a step back from all the violence and rest. The classes go on as usual, and Celica praises him on how far he has come as a teacher.